I'm a marketing associate here at Samuel French, as well as Rights Week coordinator. So thank you so much for coming to our fourth and final panel of Rights Week 2014. It's been an incredible week, and first of all, a really big thank you to HowlRound, who's watching this on live stream right now up in Boston. They've been a great collaborator on this project, and we're just happy to get these issues out and being discussed. A big part of that is all of you here and all of you watching right now. Out of curiosity, could you raise your hand if you've been to all the panels the whole week? Yeah. How about 3 of the panels? 2 of the panels? Rock on, guys, this is great. Today's also a really exciting time for us because we moved into this space on November 4th. So this is our first sort of industry open event. And going along with that, we have a couple of other events going on. In August, we are having our 39th annual Off-Off-Broadway Short Play Festival. Woo! If you're not aware of what OOB, as we call it, is, it's a really exciting festival. It's from August 5th through the 10th. We got how many submissions this year?
Oh, almost 1,400.
Almost 1,400, and narrowed it down to just 30 short plays. A lot of time was taken. They are presented during the week, and then they move on gradually to a finalist round on Saturday. So I encourage all of you to come. It's a great time to support the arts and young, well, not young, but emerging playwrights, and it's a fun time, so check it out. Also, after today, after the panel, we'd like to invite all of you to stay for a little reception in the back. You can check out the rest of our offices. Yes. And one other thing, cell phones. Please silence them, but feel free to use them. I will be live tweeting from right here. Some of our panelists might be live tweeting. And it's been a really fun component of the week to have all of that going on. So without further ado, I will hand it over to our panel and our wonderful moderator, writer and theater director, Isaac Butler.
Hello everyone here today and people of the internet. Go ahead, come on. These are our lovely panelists who I'll introduce in just 1 second. Lovely panelists. Woo! I think we have a game show instead of that'd be great. All right. Hello. Okay, great. So Stephen Chaikelson is a general manager, producer, and professor at Columbia University School of the Arts. Bruce Lazarus, Bruce Lazarus is the executive director of Samuel French. Brad Lohrenz is the director of licensing for Samuel French. Laura Penn is the executive director of the Stage Directors and Choreographers Society. And Tori Keenan-Zelt is a playwright, screenwriter, and VP of Ops at Kanjy. So please welcome our distinguished. So today, the big topic of the day is piracy in the digital age. And so since you work firmly in the digital age, Tori, and since maybe not everyone here is familiar with Kanjy, I thought I would give you a chance to talk about the company, and also if you could kick us off by talking a little bit about like how you define theatrical piracy, or how you think about it as even a term.
Sure. Hi. Kanjy is a tech startup. It's designed to be a community for dramatic writers, playwrights and screenwriters, and people who work with them as collaborative artists or in another way like agents, producers, directors, and publishers. It started out as a tool for sharing scripts, for making scripts available to that community, recognizing that writers also need to be able to control their work and to manage its sharing. So it's a platform on which writers can share scripts securely. They're searchable as 10-page previews, and then writers manage permission to view the full script. So if I want to read your script, I request your permission, you grant it to me, and then it's shared to my personal bookshelf, and I can read it. And if you upload a new script, I have the new script. And there are professional connections and all kinds of things that are built out from that, but it started as that tool, and we've developed a community around that. And sorry, what was the question?
So obviously, if you're controlling, if I need your permission to view the script, right? So
what is piracy?
What is piracy? Yeah, exactly.
Right. Well, from a writer's perspective, I define it as any unauthorized use of my writing, of my script. So that could be a production that changes an element that I've put into the script. It could be a production that I'm unaware of and have not given permission for, either through my publisher or on my own terms. Yeah, I'll let the other panelists talk about
Yeah, great. Okay, so those are two definitions, right? Unauthorized changes to a script and an unauthorized production of the script, right? So how else are and anyone feel free to jump in on this. How else are we thinking about this term?
I'll jump in. So in regards to plays, authors' rights, there's a few different things, and I just want to also address it from the digital age, since that's our topic today. This piracy as in reprinting or putting online someone's script. Unauthorized, the playwright isn't getting paid for it, maybe the playwright doesn't even want it up. It's on digital platforms. We work very hard to take those things down. In fact, we worked at, what was the number of how many we took down in the last 10 days or so?
It was over 470.
In 10 days? Wow. And that's
I have the list.
That's someone on their blog being like, hey, I have a PDF of pterodactyls or whatever.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Mrs. Rickson's third grade class doing our town.
Right, so we go on and we scour the web for it. So that's as far as scripts go. We also, and part of the digital age is it makes it easy for us to find those things, because whether it's a Google search or we have some secret web crawlers, we go out and find those things. And then also from a production standpoint, it's unauthorized productions. We have lots of pirated productions out there where people don't tell us about it and just go ahead and produce it. And it's insidious, if again, we find them, we send cease and desist and we shut them down. I actually heard a funny story. Well, it's not so funny, really, but someone, not our property, someone was doing Reasons to Be Pretty, and they changed the title of the play to Ugly People. Didn't credit the author. Who's the author in the original? Didn't credit the author. And how do you find that? Someone ratted it out, and so it was discovered. But so there's pirated productions, but piracy goes a little farther and deeper than that. If someone is changing the work of an artist, they're not only pirating their economic, financial interest in it, but they're pirating their emotional well-being. We had a situation recently where one of our artists went to see a musical that she spent years writing, only to find out that the director had rearranged the songs and changed the things, and she's sitting there for 2 hours, being like, feeling violated by it. So there's emotional capital that's also being pirated. Anyway, that's some of it.
Interesting. Any other thoughts on just a baseline sort of how we're defining this term?
Yeah, I think everything Bruce is talking about is absolutely correct. I would even, maybe for purposes of this discussion today, even open up the idea of piracy and make it a little more broad. The unauthorized use of any material protected by copyright, because it's important that we have to protect the playwrights, the author's work. Playwrights, directors, they also have to be aware of the potential infringement that they could wind up, the types of situations they could be in. The internet has made material available, instantaneously. So whether that's taking copyrighted work and pieces of existing written material and incorporating them in some way into a play, taking images and using them as part of a stage design, using music to set the mood of a show, and you find this great piece online and you say, okay, well, let me put that as underscoring in this scene. So it's important, I think, that overall, that as artists, everybody is respecting each other, whether it's a piece that was a visual piece, a music piece, a theater piece, and everybody needs to be educated so that everyone's rights are protected.
I would just say, it's theft, and I agree with everything that's been said. Piracy is theft of someone else's property, and the unlawful use of that. One of the things that we spend a lot of time trying to wrap our heads around is the unlawful capture of performance and distribution or exploitation.
So
And
what do you mean by exploitation? Is that like I'm directing a production of it and I see
that
a film of a
means
production of it?
you could, and I did my own little, let me check, because I haven't been on this site in a while today, and for $23.99 you can see Beautiful, the musical, right now. Go ahead. Now, it may not be a very good production, because it's from somebody's cell phone, or actually they do shoulder cameras and capture, but you can go online right now and pay for, which means someone's being paid, and it is not the artists. And you can watch Beautiful, you can watch anything you want. Some shows are only $14.99 if they've been around for a while.
So people are sort of bootlegging shows in the kind of like a 80s movie theater piracy kind of,
They are. They
like
are.
in the Seinfeld episode with.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the question really is, now I think many of us understand that the 13-year-old girl, or I can say 12-year-old girl, my daughter, watching a YouTube clip in her bedroom, that actually avoids the web crawlers because they speed it up a microsecond.
Right.
Because I found her watching Shrek. And my teenage son said, oh yeah, Mom, it's fine, they speed it up. So you couldn't tell it was speeded up, but it avoids the web crawlers because the rhythm of the music is just that much more different. So there's the unlawful capture and distribution, but the more and more things are captured lawfully, HD captures, there runs the risk of those being distributed then and exploited unlawfully, nationally and internationally. So this is a place where we're all in this together, because there's real money in them there hills, and it's not going to our artists.
Interesting. And I wonder based on this, because obviously, like, the other thing that happens on YouTube, which I guess is probably technically a violation of copyright, is like someone's daughter is in a high school production of David Ives' All in the Timing, and they have like Sure Thing, and they put it on YouTube so they can share it with her uncle, or or whatever. And that's technically a violation of copyright, but we would probably say that's not as big a problem as bootlegging Beautiful and selling it for $20. So
we
what?
actually take those down.
No, I understand that you take them down, but
it's
I'm wondering sort of like what are, from your perspective, sort of the biggest problems in this world of piracy?
Well, I would like to add, though, about YouTube, even though there may not be money generated from that, it could be such a horrible production that's out there that could really influence and impact others wanting to do the show.
Right.
And if that's what they see, then they're like, I'm not bothering with ever producing that show again. So there is that impact as well.
Yeah, no, of course, I'm not saying it's...
I think there's a difference between sort of innocent, I'm capturing my daughter's high school performance, and, sort of malicious, whether it's charging money for it or out and out, a professional company changing someone's work.
Right.
Well, there's other kinds of piracy too. We call it more of compliance or enforcement, where people will cheat on their license. They'll say that they're doing 2 performances and they're doing 20 performances, and they'll say they're doing it in a 100-seat theater and it's a 1,000-seat theater, or they say they're charging $10 a ticket and it's $50 a ticket.
And does that sort of stuff happen very often?
It happens. We did the number. Brad, I gave the numbers to Brad. I don't know how many.
It happens frequently. I had a great conversation with the Lori Timpson, our Director of Licensing Compliance, today. Since January, since January, we have issued 30 cease and desist, like we have closed down unlicensed productions. So one thing that we instill here is that when we hire new licensing representatives or licensing specialists, part of their training that is ingrained into them, always have an eye on that website that the people you're talking to. Double check everything they tell us. We're always constantly looking for everything that's out there. Is their application actually expressing what is on their website? Because even though they initially tell us ticket prices are X amount and so many performances and these are the dates, we always have to confirm that, because there's always, not always, but frequently there's a discrepancy between that. So we just are, everybody has on their good cop hat and their bad cop hat every day.
I just want to add one other thing. When people, this is my take, I think it's human nature. If someone's taking a song or a movie, they're taking it from a Hollywood studio or a big record company, it's nothing to them. But in the theater, if you're taking it from a writer, writers, there are very few playwrights that really can earn a living in the theater, and a lot of them try to. And when you take away that income from them, you're taking away their family's grocery money. You're taking away real money from a family. That we as an agent, we take 10 or 20%. They're getting 80 or 90%. So you're taking the money away from them. They think even if they're taking it from Samuel French, but they're not. They're taking it away from the author. And that's really the shame here. Because if authors can't make a living in the theater, then they're not going to write. They're going to be busy making a living doing something else.
Right.
I think there's also something very sad about the fact that when people are cheating on their licenses, what we're talking about are people who care enough to be doing theater in the first place. And seriously, if you care enough to be doing theater, then care about the artists who helped to create it, and don't cheat on the $50 or whatever it will be.
That's right.
We'll go back to them.
There was something, I wrote it down, and I don't have it with me, in your essay that you wrote about teachers teaching the value of art.
Right.
And that if you don't value artists, then...
Right. Yeah.
Do you remember what your quote was?
Yeah, I was basically saying that. What I was saying, and actually this gets to a question I wanted to ask, for our various definitions of piracy, where we're seeing it happen. Because my assumption is, going into this, is that a lot of this is happening in the education world. That a lot of this is happening in colleges or student theater companies or in the amateur sector. And maybe I'm completely wrong about this in terms of unlicensed production, but it happens less frequently in the professional world simply because it's so visible that it's easy to catch it.
Yeah.
Again, that's my assumption, I could be wrong. So that was why I included that sentence about, hey, I have a feeling a lot of this goes on in the education world. I probably did it when I probably did a play without paying for it when I was in college, those many years ago. But one of the things that we can instill as educators as a value is that, hey, if you value art, you have to pay the people who make it,
I think you're right. I think it does happen, and I think some of it is that we have not done the education that we need to do. And not only are they unlicensed productions, but they're replications of all of the artists' work. So they're replications of the designer's work, of the choreographer's work, of the, it's everybody's work, of the director's work. So that they're taking the unlawfully captured productions, and they are unlawfully replicating the script, everything. So, and a lot of it is because some don't know that they can't do that, and some because we haven't made it as easy as we need to for them to do that, and then some, I guess, are just mean.
I would like to add to that, and what we here try to do at Samuel French is, particularly if it's an educational institution, we try to make it an educational experience.
What does that mean?
Well, a teaching moment.
So if you come to Stephen and you're like, Stephen, you really shouldn't have put on, I don't know.
Well, hopefully we catch it in advance,
Right.
or while it's going on. So instead of beating the heck out of them, we talk to them, we tell them exactly where it went wrong, what they were supposed to have done, how they were supposed to have done it. Usually, not always, but usually the teachers are horrified, because sometimes teachers are the ones who get the coin flip in the teacher's lab, and they're in charge of the play that year, and they may not know, oh, well, here's some scripts left over in the library, let's just do a play. They may not know that there's actual copyright attached to that. So we try to make it an educational experience, but it has to do with education.
One of the things we recently became aware of, like a light bulb went off for us, that we send out our licenses, and it's very clear that unauthorized changes, you can't make certain changes, whether it's to the order of the show or the placing of the intermission or changing the characters or the gender of the characters. Playwrights have certain restrictions, others are free with it and the like. But it occurred to us that the director of the play may not see that license. There's some administrator who's signing off on that license. And so that teacher, or even in a professional situation, they didn't see that. Now we assume they know that. But so now, and I've been talking with Laura about this, we're in conversation about it. We would like to actually have the director of the play acknowledge that they know that they're not allowed to make unauthorized changes.
Interesting. And I imagine like an unauthorized change to a show is a lot harder to catch than an unauthorized production, because the Google alert goes off that Reasons to Be Pretty is happening. You're like, hey, we didn't license that.
We were talking recently, what was it, the top, someone commented, or there was a review that said, and in the top of the second act, there's no intermission in this play.
Or this new 90-minute version.
Right. And so, Stephen, from I guess either an educator perspective, from an educator's perspective, because you've taught for a long time at Columbia in that management program. I mean, do you guys, what conversations do you have around this stuff? I just, speaking of that program, is there ethics component to graduating from there? Is there, I know you teach classes on the law and the arts, and so.
Well, in terms of the theater management and producing program, which I run, we spend a lot of time dealing with rights issues. It's coming out of their ears by the end of the first year. Really having dealt with issues of intellectual property, small rights, grand rights, licensing work, assignment, all different aspects of it for the entire first year of the program. I think it's sort of a given. If it's a management and producing program, you're dealing with the business, you're dealing with the law. It's natural that you're going to be confronting those issues, dealing with that kind of curriculum. The problem is an acting program, a directing program, even a playwriting program, and most of the time you don't have a lot of exposure to the business of the business, right? You're dealing with the art of the business, but you're not dealing with the business. If you're maybe you have just the basics of getting an agent or what a contract is, that type of thing. But you're not really getting into what I think are really important, the important issues of intellectual property, which are important or crucial for all artists to be aware of. Even at Columbia, there's been very little that's really structured in the graduate program as far as introducing the artists to these topics. We, in the past, have dealt with them pretty much on a one-off basis. When a director has said, okay, this is what I want to do as my second-year project, this is what I want to do as my thesis production, then they go through a process with their producer or manager who's a student and with the departmental staff of how to acquire the rights. And so they learn by doing. Right? They're sort of mentored in that process.
And is that because it tends to be, an MFA and master's programs, right? It's like, well, this is the art, and you're here to nurture your art for a couple of years, and you're probably spending tens of thousands of dollars to do so, and so we're not going to bother with the real world stuff. It's like, here's when you become an artist, right? And then, even though there's all these practical realities that are so important to that life.
I think the artists want to teach the art, and who can really blame them? They don't want to bother with the others, with the business side, with those rules. But because you have a lot of really creative people out there who are students who are flexing their creative muscles and working in school, they're doing their thesis production. They want to make it the best production they've ever done. They're dreaming big, and they want to adapt. They want to change language. They want to change characters from male to female. They want to experiment in many different ways, and because they're being mentored through that process, we're able to either advise them, or their faculty able to advise them. And sometimes we will actually go to a particular licensing company or an agent from whom we've gotten the rights and say, here's a request. Can we do this? So, because we're Columbia, because we're high profile, we take these issues really seriously. Something that we've actually discussed fairly recently is a kind of a master class for all the first year MFA students who come in to really introduce them to these basic concepts. In the same way that we're introducing them to, okay, here's how you produce a show in this particular theater, or here's how you deal with tech in this particular theater. Let's also talk about here's how you deal with rights if you want to do a project. Because there's so much, when you get into making theater in an educational setting, there's also a lot that goes into it as far as what people consider to be fair use, what they think they should be allowed to get away with, not when they're working extracurricularly, but here I'm paying so much money and spending all this time to become a theater artist, there's a certain amount of fair use, and people throw that terminology around, and I should just be entitled as part of my education to do this. And especially if I'm doing it and I'm not charging admission, there are a lot of thorny questions that come up. And I think it's really important for us to sort of start from the very beginning and set the ground rules.
Interesting. And
I was just going to say, we would be happy to come and be guest lecturers at one of those classes.
you make things happen here.
Careful what you wish for.
What's interesting is I did actually, and I know there's several programs at Columbia, so forgive me if I confuse them, but I did go and speak with Anne Bogart's class this year, which was fantastic, and I actually, proposed to her that possibly Ralph Sevish and I would be an interesting duo at some point to come in and talk with the directors and writers.
Ralph Sevish of the Dramatists Guild.
Of the Dramatists Guild. Oh yes, I just assumed.
We're getting along so
But
nice.
I take it back. I'll call her tomorrow. But what's interesting is I think we have, as the organization that represents professional directors and choreographers, I think probably some of what has happened, particularly with the proliferation of professional training programs, and I think the reliance that we have in the field on those programs to train. So you get trained and then you're a professional. And I think there's assumptions made on both sides. I have to just sort of respond to some of this by of course saying that there is no support whatsoever from SDC as an organization for the unlawful changing, adapting, manipulation of an author's property. I mean, that's just wrong. You can't do it. So how do we engage in that, and what is the education of our members, given that I think we probably on some level it's like, well, of course you can't do that. I mean, it's shocking. Of course you can't do that. So where did we get confused? And what happens in the training programs, what happens in the professional arena, and how can we collaborate to strengthen the education?
Interesting. Tori, I was wondering, for you, I mean, have you, because you're our playwright on the panel, one of the things, have you had experience of this, of knowing of a production that changed your work, or that did your work without you telling it, giving permission, or, I mean, have you actually...
No, I haven't had it personally. I have had people contact me about a script that is published and ask if they can do the production without paying a licensing fee,
right,
because it's a fundraiser or something like that. And I want people to be doing my work, so my gut says sure, but I think that I as a writer need to be more careful about if I'm going to make a decision to share my work in that way, recognizing that that's what I'm doing, that I'm actually subsidizing the production in some way. And I think when we talk about value and ascribing value to scripts, especially in an educational setting, it's sort of funny territory because my goal as an early career writer, as an MFA student, was to get my scripts good enough that people want them and they want to pay money for them. But there's so much work that goes into developing a play. I mean, it takes years and years, right? So it already has value before I am making a living as a playwright, and how can I leverage it and recognize that that's happening? And that's not been part of the conversation, at least in my Facebook.
Interesting. Are you currently in MFA?
No, I'm about a year out.
Oh, great, cool. I guess, and this is sort of a question for anyone who wants to leap in and take it. I mean, obviously, if you're published by Sam French, you have a certain structure behind you that represents you, that helps deal with this issue, that sends those cease and desist letters, except, or if you have an agent, they have your management team, you have a team behind you. But I'm sure for plenty of people watching this, or who will watch it or following it on Twitter, they don't have a team. They're a younger or earlier career playwright, and they've a Google alert for their name comes out, and they find out in Sheboygan someone is doing a play of their, who knows, maybe in New York, and just to speak to that experience for a little bit, sort of like what structures are in place that artist can take advantage of, that they can. I mean, do you have to hire a lawyer? Do you have to so what what do you do in that instance? And anyone who wants to jump in on that. Not to
I'll-
jump in.
You know, number one, you can call the Dramatists Guild. I'm sure they're happy to help, whether you're a member or not, although it's not too expensive to become a member of the Dramatists Guild. But you know, you can be your own lawyer. You don't need a lawyer to send a cease and desist letter, and I'm sure you can find the cease and desist letter on the internet.
Probably copyright. Probably
I say that because, you know, I actually had...
Maybe you'll get a cease and desist.
I actually saw a contract that came in, and the attorney had copyrighted his contract. I never saw that before. Because lawyers traditionally cut and paste. So I think you can, you know, I think it's really about valuing your work. Just like, you know, they asked you to do it for free. When you said it, what popped in my mind was, I would have said, you know what, pay me $100 and I'll make a donation of $100. But at least there's value in your work. I think if we don't value the work, then it has less value. So, but I think people can take care of themselves. There's volunteer lawyers for the arts. There's all kinds of resources.
Right. Interesting. And I guess, you know, to circle back to the internet question, right? Because this is piracy in the digital age. To get to the second half, you know, Laura, what efforts? So, I mean, you were talking about, you know, people are bootlegging productions of plays, and they're selling their, you know, again, Kramer with the video camera style version of Beautiful online, right? And what is the SDC doing around this sort of stuff?
Well, first of all, I think that the solution to that is ultimately going to rest in collaboration with a group of artists, and certainly, and you know, unions and guilds. We spend a fair amount of time talking about this at COBUG, which is the Coalition of Broadway Unions and Guilds, as much of this, although not exclusively, but much of it is Broadway commercial work that is has the higher value. So it's a collaborative effort, I think, that's going to sort of help us find our way. But I think what we're specifically trying to do is create relationships and try to find the model that works for the lawful capture and the lawful distribution, and make that, it's not unlike, you know, frankly, iTunes, right? It's not unlike what the music industry did. We've got to find a way to actually allow our product and our work. We can't deny that. I mean, with the advent of HD captures and, you know, technology, you can actually capture live theater in a way now that's quite dynamic and pretty fabulous. And I'll pay $20 to go see Phaedra, you know, from NT Live, because it's really great. So it doesn't replace the live experience, but we can't deny that this is happening and is going to happen more and more. So how do we figure out how to embrace it, make it possible, make sure the artists are compensated up front, and that there's some sort of back end? So we're working with producers and our collaborators to try to figure out how to do that.
So just part of what you're saying then is that one of the ways to control piracy is to find a way to distribute the product in a way that people can get their hands on it at a, let's say, a reasonable price, however we're defining that, and that cuts out a certain amount of the people who are turning to, you know, I mean, that's one of the things that they show, one of the things that iTunes did, if I remember correctly, is
Exactly.
they took a chunk of the pirating market because there was a cheaper and more convenient way to get music that
And there was a
legal.
study done in London, I'm sorry, there
No,
was a
it's
study
a
done in
question.
London around the NT Live about, you know, does it actually, are you, you know, hijacking theater go? Is it going to, you know, cannibalize your theater goers? And it's not. The people that are going to go see it in the movie theater are either the people who are going to see it in the theater as well, because they like that dynamic, or they're never going to see it in the theater. So it's just more people. So I don't think cannibalization is a problem.
I think that study even showed that people who had never been to the National Theatre reported they were more likely to go
In
when
the
they were
future.
visiting London because they had seen an NT Live.
So I think it's a room.
May I ask her a follow-up question?
Do I get an opinion? No.
So I was just curious, do you feel like then the live stage experience right now, live stage theater, we're behind in all of this?
Yes. I think I think sometimes we feel a little precious about ourselves and our work. And I think we are behind because we just weren't going to go there. right? Because the live theater experience is live. And what happened is sort of technology and a few smart entrepreneurs, and then a lot of kids and a lot of young people and a lot of it figured out, okay, well, we're doing it anyway. So I do think we thought it'll never happen. And I think I think we were wrong. And that there's no money in it. You know, there's no money in it, right? There's no money in it. But if you had told me 10 years ago I was going to pay $200 a month to watch TV, right? You know?
But somebody's paying $20 for that bootlegged Beautiful.
Well, they
so
are.
there is
but
somebody
that's
who will
because
pay money
they
for
will
it.
pay money for it, exactly. I mean, but I think 10 years ago
yeah.
it would have been, forget it. You know, nobody's going to pay to see a Broadway show on their television. Sure they are. They're watching them on their Kindle.
Right. Right. Interesting. Interesting. We had a question. I don't know if this is someone from the audience or from Twitter. I just asked them, asking about the just sort of the general issue of the publication, not the production of scripts, but the publication of scripts without permission online. Which, of course, I guess makes it easier to produce them without permission because then you can just, you search that playwright and you find them. And obviously, this is something that was a big concern for Kanjy because you can only read a 10-page excerpt, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know, is from that perspective.
Yeah, that's a slightly different question because it sounds like that's about other people publishing a script on behalf of a writer. Kanjy is really trying to solve the problem of how do you make your work more available and discoverable
while still protecting it.
While still protecting it and managing it. Yeah, but the thinking behind the 10-page preview was that that's sort of a standard with lit managers, right? You do get a 10-page preview, you evaluate the script, and then you decide if you want to read more often. So that's enough to at least get a feel and give people a taste. And then as the writer, you want to manage access to the full piece because that has real value. The scripts are not downloadable from Kanjy and they're not printable, although it's the internet. If you're intrepid, you can get screenshots, but that's sort of like photocopying a script, right? It takes time and, yeah. So it's sort
Don't press Apple II so many times.
You may as well just ask me for it, I will give it to you.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so it's
What we do with our, when we do a musical, we have rental material. We'll be renting the orchestrations and the like. And when we send out a license, those rental materials are marked with the licensee's name and order number. So, I mean, someone could, I guess, white out everything and, scan it and the like, but it makes it very hard for them. So when we find materials that's on, that is pirated, we know what the source is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Right, because their name is just right there. Right. I promise it wasn't.
Really?
Yeah.
Actually, I wanted to check.
Yeah. No, I remember having to erase those, right? And whenever you did the show at summer camp, you always had to erase them so that they could go in with that, so that you wouldn't get.
What camp was
get
that?
Bucks Rock in New Milford, Connecticut. To speak more to this digital age question, do you guys feel just in general, I mean, obviously you've said that the internet in some ways makes it much easier to track when the piracy is occurring, but it also creates some new mechanisms via which it occurs, right? So, now that we're in Web 4.0 or whatever era of the web we're in, do you think that we're doing a better job of controlling it than we used to, a worse job of controlling it? Is it harder? Is it easier? What new strategies? I mean, obviously you've spoken to one new strategy, Laura. But what new strategies, any of you, do you feel we could use to sort of get ahead of the digital innovation?
I think there's actually less of it, but I think we find it more. So it feels like there's a lot. Mm-hmm. I think it's been going on for a long time, and just we haven't known about it. So now we see it, and now we go after it.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I agree, and I also feel like even if a theater thinks they got caught and they erase it completely from their website, guess what? Somebody was in that cast and they still have it on their Facebook page.
Right.
So we have captured a lot of things that on Facebook page as well. So I think it's.
I just want to say we're not really. I mean, as a licensor, we want to protect our authors, but the producer's also our customer. So we're not looking to really embarrass them. We're looking to educate them. We're looking to have them do the right thing. At some point, actually, I once heard someone say, you know, the customer is always right until they're not your customer anymore. So a customer who is stealing from us is not our customer anymore. In which case, then, you know, we're gonna do what we have to do. But we listen. We love theater. We want people to be making theater. We want the playwright to make money. We want the theater to make money. We want the audience to enjoy the show. So we're facilitators of theater. So we're not looking to squelch them. We just want them to play fair.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts on the internet, whether it's made it easier or harder? Just more visible?
I think it's made it easier to replicate full productions. I think we find, you know, community theaters, you know, more semi-professional companies probably that are able to literally replicate an entire production. And we work quite closely with the designers to help each other. It's like, oh, my set, oh, so you're, you know, to make sure we're trying to find those, whether those are lawfully licensed plays, whether the playwright or the composer or the lyricist are part of that or not. I guess we assume they're lawfully licensed. I mean, we haven't put you in that loop. Maybe we should, because we, but I think it has made it easier. And some of that, when it comes to preservation and legacy, and you know, some of that will end up being great, because don't we all wish we had more of Fosse's work, you know, available from a historical perspective, for example. But I think it has made it harder to, easier to do and harder to keep track of in some ways, from that point of view, which is a little different.
I would say email for scripts. You know, it makes it so much easier to share and to pass on something that is very valuable. And so now the challenge is, how do we create tools that will, well, at least from my perspective, that will let us share them, but also let us track them and let us treat them as the valuable commodities that they are.
Interesting. I think, even though it's a little early, I think it might be fun to, because some people are tweeting some questions and stuff. It might be fun to throw it over to the audience. People seem very eager over here. I see these hands, and I don't know anyone's name. So you, sir, in the back. Hi.
Yes. So I've been sort of shaking in the back here, not angrily, but just sort of excited to explore something with you guys. It's like a big problem that the music industry had, the film industry has, is that in the 90s, they weren't recognizing how quickly technology was moving, and therefore they weren't valuing their audience. We talk a lot about audiences not valuing art, which is very true. We haven't taught art value. But when you look at the fact that Broadway plays cost $400, or whatever for a ticket, we are no longer valuing our consumers. You know what I mean? You see, look at like Holler If You Hear Me, that probably has a great audience out there, a bunch of kids in California who would love to see that, right? But they have no access to it at all. So of course they want to see a recording like your daughter did. So my question is sort of how are we looking to better democratize the art form that we are in? Because right now we work in an art form that is very much like an ivory tower. It makes it very difficult for people to get things in a way that is just not free but accessible. Because if you look at television that started valuing their artists or valuing their audiences a lot more, and you now pay $200 for TV.
They also all employ playwrights.
Exactly. And, just saying. So now as TV is looking more oh wow, there's a world for people who want to watch a show like Community. Even though it's not making that much money, they're doing things like this. So how are you guys as theater creators and theater
what's your name?
Jeremy.
Jeremy, great. So Jeremy's question, just I have to repeat it for the camera. So Jeremy's question is about sort of the other way of this two-way street, right? It was not only how do we get audiences to value the art, although sometimes it's also about theater practitioners valuing the art that they're making, but how do we get artists to value the art, but also how do we get the artists or the producers to value the audience? And it sort of gets back to your point, Laura, and I think I raised this in the piece that I wrote about, how do you democratize it? How do you offer something at a way that people can access it and that is at a price that seems reasonable? I know that's a really vague term, right? But so how do we kind of is some of this a response to the inaccessibility of the work, and if so, what do we do about that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's, as I said, it lies in trying to figure out who we partner with and how we create models that work for the lawful capturing and distribution in other ways. How are you going to get a Broadway ticket for a musical below $150 is, I mean, that's like a huge thing. That's a big gnarly problem that we have. But there are other ways to get the work out.
The problem with the theater is that there's a ceiling on capacity. There's only so many seats in the theater, and the theater's got to figure out how much money to charge in order to pay for all of those artists and all of those designers and all of the stagehands and whatever, and make a profit for investors. So it's built into it. It's not like a movie where if it's a hit, there's an unlimited number of screens you can go to.
One thing I will say is that right now we have like over 1,000 people, or however many could be watching this on HowlRound right now, and they're engaging with us via Twitter. So like, if we can do that in this space, why couldn't we do that on like a Spotify of theater or
I think that's a great idea. It's a great idea.
And that's NT Live.
That's NT, yeah. You can subscribe to NT Live or the digital theater, the other one they have in.
There is also and if anyone in the audience knows about this better than I do, please feel free to speak to this. There is also, oddly, on the other end of the spectrum, with like more underground and experimental work, there is a pay-per-view internet service, like Young Jean Lee's.
On the boards,
yeah.
On the boards.
Yeah.
On the boards that started that in Seattle, and they do, lanes.
Does anyone here actually use on the boards? Do you want to? Yeah, all right.
But I also would like to add, there is New York City theater, but then there's a thriving theatrical world west of the Hudson River. So there is a lot of theater going on out there for not a lot of money, and a lot of theaters every week have Pay What You Can, and that's both professional and amateur. So it's easy for us to be here in our insular situation, think about how much tickets cost here, but there is a thriving, vital community west of the Hudson River too, as well. So
I think it is.
And work is getting done out there.
I think it's inevitable that Broadway is ultimately going to embrace the digital distribution of the work that we create. It's going to take time. We talk about the education of students. There's a big educational process as well for the people producing and directing and writing work for Broadway and for major commercial and not-for-profit theater. There's so many issues and so many different, shouldn't say factions, but so many different groups and their respective concerns that need to be heard, need to be dealt with. From the point of view of it's going to cannibalize my audience, it's going to potentially cannibalize my licensing down the road.
I'm sure there's all sorts of union stuff that needs to be negotiated.
There's huge costs, and we need to make it much more economically viable to be able to capture and then have everybody share in, participate in profits down the line, participate in success. There's the issue of, well, what if we capture it and it's not quite exactly the way we wanted it? Or what if we capture it and it looks like that old-fashioned, great performances broadcast of 3 cameras sort of standing there and locked in this little television frame, which I agree, we've gotten so much better about how we can capture a live experience. So little by little, I think we will get there. It's inevitable.
Mm-hmm. I had a crazy capture conversation with somebody that just goes to show how the producers are really part of this and have to understand the artist's right to benefit from this, because this has to do with a very popular show that was captured and the plans for a kind of cinecast, NT Live, although not NT Live, this was several years ago, and trying to figure out what the front end, back end, all the billing, all the stuff you have to figure out when you do this. And because commercial Broadway shows can now be captured in their entirety for promotion, there was a moment where this person I was talking to actually said, well, we could just say this is promotional to advocate or promote the amateur licensing of this. So we're capturing the Broadway show, we're screening it on hundreds of screens across the country and selling lots of tickets, but we're going to call it promotional because we really want to do this to push the amateur rights. Now, I was like, it's like, well, I'm just saying we could say it. Yeah, but you're not going to say it because that's absurd. So yes, the unions have to work with producers, but frankly, producers have to understand that. But that's how far like a producer would go to try to maybe not pay an artist.
Right.
Unbelievable.
We had a question over here. I want to make sure.
Yeah, I've actually been waiting to ask this question all week. It's the only question I've asked all week. But, so I'll ask the question. I'll add a few sentences of backup. The question is, does theater belong in a digital medium? The reason why I ask is because music, books have all moved into the digital space and have been very much well adopted. But as a response, we're now in a time where people are starting to move more back to analog. So you can buy, I personally collect vinyl records. You can buy cassette tapes of current bands who release their new albums on cassette. Books, small letterpress, indie presses have started releasing physical books that are, that you might want to put on a shelf. Theater itself is an analog experience. And we haven't quite figured it out yet in a way like iTunes that is spot on or Spotify. So are we just trying to force the round peg into the square hole?
Right, and what's your name?
Ryan.
Ryan, okay, so Ryan has a question essentially about, obviously like part of theater's essential appeal is its liveness, right? It's that's what makes it immediate. And so should we even be thinking about, well, how do we force this live thing into this replicable medium? And what happens to theater when it is broadcast on the screen instead of us appearing?
Well, I think that's a really great question, and what occurs to me is that a movie or a record is meant to be broadcast. Television shows meant to be broadcast and live in some sort of recorded form, and the way we replicate the theater is by having groups do it live all across the country, professional and amateur groups performing the show. That is the replica of theater, and it is an analog medium. And the stock and amateur licensing of it is the replica.
Right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I sort of feel like there's also been a change in our sort of understanding of what a regional production even is. And I'm thinking about, if you buy a production script of, I don't know, Streetcar, Elia Kazan's production is detailed in there very carefully, from small stage directions to the set and everything like that. And there was a way in which you're speaking in dialogue with, or maybe even replicating to some extent what that production looked like, and that script kind of enables you to do that. And we don't think that way anymore. We're not thinking like, oh, well, this production in, wherever, I'm from DC, so I'll say this production in Washington, DC is kind of like the one that you could have seen in New York. We're saying, no, if you do that in DC, it has to be its own independent thing with its own independent ideas, etc. I mean, I feel like part of this is that there's a cultural shift there, right? I mean, maybe it's not formal, but
it's, I think it just comes with the territory. But it's one of the nice things, one of the things I really like about what we do at Samuel French is that, I equate it with like the gaming industry. We have all of these kids who are virtuoso gamers. And I said to my son once, would you rather watch the movie, or would you rather play the game on the movie? He said, I'd rather play the game. And I said, why? It wasn't his exact words, but basically what he said was, when I play the game, I am the hero. When I watch the movie, I'm watching the hero. And the nice thing about theater and about doing it in the stock and amateur world is that there's all of these people who want to participate, and they get to be the hero. They get to play the parts. And so therefore I think, theater has that life in it that transcends the other mediums.
I would also say when we're talking about the relationship between stage and screen experiences, that has already happened in our culture, right? Because TV came out of theater, and early TV was basically captured by productions. And it's evolved and it's become more filmic, and now film language is shaped by the perspective of the camera. And so similarly, you kind of have to be one character as you're watching a movie, and on stage you're experiencing it as yourself. And so if we're capturing a stage production, that is inherently different from making a movie of the stage production. I personally am really glad that we have captured some wonderful productions, like the original Into the Woods, growing up.
to watch it on Netflix.
Yeah. I want to be able to do that. I don't think that it's either or necessarily.
Interesting, interesting. Yes?
One comment I'd like to make about, we're noticing now the live filming of Sound of Music last year, and now they're doing Peter Pan, which I'm very excited about, I must say. That's different than watching the movie of it. And the kids took to it. I'm the head of the drama department at LaGuardia, and all the kids watch Sound of Music. And I swear to God, none of them, if I held up Julie Andrews on the cover of Sound of Music, they're out the door. But the fact that it was live and people could have like messed up. No, I'm sorry. That's a hook. That's a hook, and they were interested by that. And they're all over Facebook about Christopher Walken playing Captain Hook. They can't wait to see how he's going to do it. So that's a whole different experience than watching Cyril Richard, and even though that's a live taping too, but it's created quite a buzz for kids, and it's a very exciting process. Anyway, that's just a comment. I have one suggestion. I see 2,000 kids every fall for auditions to come into our freshman class, and because there has been such a decimation of the arts in the middle schools, I have kids coming in and doing 2 monologues, and they will be doing a scene where they play both George and Emily. They do not know what a monologue is. So this is the school where maybe when they decide to do a play, they don't know the rights. They don't know what a monologue is. They don't know anything. Especially the schools from the Bronx. These kids are clueless and starving for something. So it might be a nifty idea maybe to put a video on, something really easy, and send it to the principals of middle schools and high schools, letting them know about how excited you are that they might want to do plays. And they might have to put them on themselves, and maybe you could get kids doing it themselves, but they need to follow these rules. And then there was some give and take about how much that would cost. For instance, this year I paid $25,000 to do Grease. That sort of puts your height, the best we could do was break even. We didn't make a penny. And that's 5 months of work, because we start off with a $25,000 deficit. But we did it, and it was great. It was great for morale, and the kids loved it, and hoo-ha. But there might be some give and thank you. There might be some give and take with these, especially the middle schools, and or the schools in areas that are really have no arts. That you sent them a very short videotape, 5 minutes, about we see you don't have an arts program. Maybe you're interested in putting on plays. Here's the rules you have to follow in order to do it. And you have any questions, call us. Any kids would like to call us, and make it very welcoming as opposed to scolding. We might be able to do some real education and support you and support the school.
And what's your name?
Sandy Jason from LaGuardia High School.
So Sandy from LaGuardia, just because I have to repeat all
yes.
this, makes a really interesting point about finding ways to reach students who often come into arts programs, are very green, don't know how the system works, using even just a simple short video saying like, hey, here's what you need to do if you want to do a play. You also brought up, and I'd love to get your guys' comments on that, but you also brought up a second question, which I just thought on a factual level is interesting to know, which is how are the licensing rates for educational productions at various levels set? Where do those numbers come from? Who sets them, et cetera, et cetera? So either one of those.
First of all, Sandy, I just want to say that I think that's a great idea, and we would love to have your input on it. We'll make a video of it. We'll do it.
Great.
But we need some educators to consult with us. And
well, that would be me.
Over there is Abby Van Nostrand.
Abby, we emailed this week already.
Is there anyone who's having relationship trouble lately? I mean, while we're solving problems. This is great. I'm so excited.
And I've seen some of your productions at your school. They're great. I will tell you this. I think one of the overarching themes of this week that we've discussed that has come out of all of this is the greater need for education in all in all areas. So I think probably what our big takeaway from this whole week is that there is a lot more education that needs to take place. And I think that what you've just said is a great place to start.
Great.
So I think that's great. I appreciate that.
So that's great. So I've always been just curious about, how do the rates for, how does the, LaGuardia High School wants to do Greece, it will cost them $25,000 to do so, sort of like, how do those decisions about the different rates and the different levels get made?
Brad, you want to handle
I'm
that?
pretending like I didn't hear the question.
Okay.
We have a formula that's pretty similar to what all of the licensing agencies have, and it's kind of a secret formula, and it's pretty much across the board, and it's usually very, very similar. We have 1 or 2 titles in our catalog that are considered premier titles. Grace is one of them, and it has a very high royalty attached to it.
Yes.
And
non-negotiable, shall we say.
Thank you. I wasn't going to say that word. But most of, as for if it's an amateur play, if it's just a straight play, the royalty price is on the website. So there's no secret there, unless there's some tiered situations where if there's a few more seats or if the ticket price is raised, that it may be adjusted a little bit there. But for the amateur, we take what we consider to be the projected gross of what the amateur situation will be, and then we affix a percentage of that fee. And we are almost completely all aligned in that with the other agencies. There are a couple of plays that are musicals that are a little bit pricier.
For the most part,
was that
we have.
And then thank you for what transparency you can bring to it.
For the most part, our school rates have not kept up with the cost of inflation or cost of living. I mean, we're charging a fraction, relatively speaking, of what we used to charge in the 30s and 40s and 50s. Everything else has gone up in price. Ours has creeped up. What do we charge for most plays? It's $75 a performance. Back then we were charging, $25, but $25 was a whole lot more money back then. So, it's still a pretty good deal on most things. There are, as Brad said, some premium titles that just command that, and a lot of that is driven by the authors. This is, we represent authors, and if they want us to charge more money for it, and they're willing to do with less productions, that's where we are.
You had a question, sir.
I hope I'm not going off topic here. Google is doing a mass digitalizing of books. I don't think the answer is that. Do you all have any concerns with that?
You're talking about the Google Books project, where do you guys?
Joe, do you want to address that? Is that your question? No? Google Books?
Yeah, what is the question?
I could actually, because I manage the Google Book project. I'm the lit manager, so.
Amy Rosemarsh.
It's a very short answer, but Google is opting for things that they know are public domain. They actually give publishers the option as to how much of the book goes online, as to how much doesn't, as to how much is exposed. Sam Rich hasn't uploaded any books in a while, I think in 2 to 3 years, but when we were doing it pretty actively, we were only opting for 10% of the book to be available. And they don't show 5 pages in order. So actually, if you are looking to, plus it's very hard to rip a Google book, but you can't ever really get a sense of the play. I actually use it now when we have licensing questions about swear words. Sometimes I'll pull up our book samples and search for swear words within a book, but it's actually pretty hard to rip a monologue or rip a... Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that is another, I imagine that's another thing that happens actually, because you mentioned swear words right there. Another thing that I imagine happens in the educational setting is that there's certain, I don't know that we want our, in our 8th grade production of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
Which I will go see. And I'll film it.
Just don't post it on YouTube.
You'd come over and see it, wouldn't you?
I'd say the vast majority of authors are willing to make changes to their play if requested. They just want to be asked. There are some authors that say, no, this is my play. If you want to do, if you don't want to do swear words, don't do my play. Do somebody else's play, but don't take my play and change it.
Okay, I have to add to this too. Ask, A-S-K, ask. I've been working it for 20 years, and I just tell people, ask the question. Ask us first. We will work with the agents. We will call up the playwrights ourselves. We will try to get answers for you. Just a second, Amy Rowland's March. There is nothing more difficult for everybody involved than to have to untangle it on the end. If a playwright finds out that some changes have been made and the production's already up, all they know is that changes have been made. It may be just some simple language changes, taking some nasty words and taking some swear words, but once they know that it's been changed, it is so difficult to unravel. Please ask us. I asked my staff today. We all looked since January 1st. We have made over almost 300 contacts with agents and playwrights asking about things like gender casting changes. Can we take out swear words? Can we trim it a little bit because it needs to come in under 2 hours? If we know in advance, we can handle it in a much better fashion than after the fact. Okay, I'm done now. Now you can go in.
No, I was just going to ask you for statistics.
Isaac, before you were sort of confessing having infringed on copyright.
Sure. I'm sure we all have it.
I used to teach theater with middle and high school students, and I would have begged, borrowed, or stolen anything to work with them. And because I thought that I was stealing from Sam French, not from the writer. And if that were part of the conversation, and it were an opportunity for the kids to connect with the writer in some way, that could be really exciting. Yeah.
No, I'm going to tell a story. Before I came to work at Samuel French, my youngest son was in 3rd grade, and they were doing Wicked. I knew. So
I don't know this man.
What made it really terrible was I went into the classroom, and the teacher had a bootleg video of the Broadway show, and she was using that to teach the students. So I was really offended because not only was she's doing that, but she was teaching my child that it was okay to take other people's work. So I wanted to say something. But you know what? And I think this is true for. I tell on myself because I think it's true for parents and people all over that maybe want to say something. But you know what? My wife said to me, "Don't say anything. This is his teacher. Just let it be. Okay? He doesn't need to stand out in the class. He doesn't need to be the guy that's the bad guy that's shutting down their show." So I didn't say anything. Right? I wanted to say something, but I didn't say anything. So I'm saying it now.
You're tough.
I'm just going to put some.
Another 3 seconds. It's more criminal than that because you've taken a completely creative, innovative, artistic force in 3rd grade and made them imitate something on a tape. How dare you do that? How do you know what they would have come up with on their own?
Absolutely.
It's just heartbreaking. Okay, I've said that.
And I think somewhat related, I love when they record and broadcast theater. I want more of it because it gives me access to it. And I've had conversations with people asking, why doesn't this happen more? And some people bring up that choreographers and directors don't necessarily want the recording available because then other people will do that choreography or take those directing ideas into their own productions. And that's even less tangible than the words or the music. So where is the line?
So, and what's your name, sir?
Joe.
Joe. Okay, so Joe is raising the question essentially of directorial and choreographic plagiarism. If there's a record of a production, and this is actually still, I think, both legally and in reality a pretty controversial issue. If there's a record of a production with blocking that you can write down and imitate, and then you take that blocking, what is that? How does that work? And is that part of the resistance to moving into the digital age and lawful distribution?
Well, I don't think there's a lot of resistance to lawful capture and distribution. You know, there are some there are certainly some of the school of thought it's a live experience, it should only be live, it shouldn't be captured, you know, I want people to come to the theater. But, you know, for the most part, I think people just want to be, you know, paid or acknowledged. I do think, much like the Wicked story, and this is at a professional level, where we actually learn that an unlawfully captured production, you don't even have to write down the blocking. They sit in the rehearsal hall with their laptop and say, okay, now what you do on this, okay, on that line you cross over there and you come down here on that. I mean, there are theater companies where that is okay to do. And for directors and choreographers, that's not okay to do. Now, if you want to do it, ask. I was saying earlier, you know, it's sure, send me $50, but really, could you put a sign in the lobby now that says, inspired by the original production, directed by so-and-so? You know, don't misrepresent that that's your work, because it's not your work. It's my work as a director or choreographer. Certainly licensing would be great, income would be great where it's appropriate, blah, 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 but it really is, you cannot misrepresent that you directed and choreographed that show when you didn't.
We're working on a few plays and musicals where we are creating a director's guide that can be licensed so that the director can be compensated for it.
It's like a show line.
Yeah.
Like, for example, 39 Steps. People constantly are recreating the Broadway direction of it because it's amazing direction. It makes the show work. So we're working with the original director to create a Bible for that.
Can I ask Laura a question? So, I have a question, because this is an area that I don't know as well. So, if a theater wants to reproduce one of your members' works, their direction, do they contact you?
Well, this is...
What happens?
This is where I think we have to take responsibility, just like we have to take some responsibility for understanding what's possible in the digital age. We have to, and in education, we have to find ways for that to be easier, because it's not clear. It's not clear what the path is. We need our own video to complement your video to middle schools that says, and if you don't want to actually direct 12th Night, but would like a cutting and a cast breakdown and a director's, you know, whatever, you know, you can get that, again, for, you know, for whatever that might be. It's not easy to do. You can, we do have instances where we have been contacted. We always help facilitate the relationship. We also have things that we've caught, that we've called and said, oh wow, that would be so-and-so's production, and gotten either compensation or credit. But it's not easy to do.
It's also an opportunity for the director or the choreographer to say, I'll come do it, pay me.
Yeah, that's right.
I'll come do it, yeah, exactly. So it's making it possible that we have to do that. And I think as people get inspired because they see more things online and they want it to look like that, and I'm in Omaha and I want to do it just like they did it on Broadway, we have to make that possible for them to do. We always encourage original work first. I mean, but in the case of wanting to replicate, we should make it possible.
Yes.
Hey, my name's Ira. I am really excited about this whole conversation because I'm working on a play about Napster right now called Dark Side Wears Hacker, or Two Boys Called Sean. It's going to be cool.
All those words, I didn't hear them.
And I want to say, first off, Jeremy knows what he's doing. That guy is smart. That guy knows what he's talking about. I like surveys and information gathering through crowdsourcing, because I'm from the digital age. I have a series of references that I'm going to ask you about, and if you are aware of them, if you could raise your, let's say, left hand. Am I raising my left hand? Left hand. Left hand? Is that good? Sure. Cool. All right. If you've heard of this, raise your hand. Mashup. What is a mashup?
It's like a sampling of a lot of different things kind of mashed up together. My son talks about mashup.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that close?
You're close.
Oh,
You're very close.
geez.
You're very close.
Anybody who watches Glee knows what it is.
Fiction medley.
Has
It is just a
anyone
medley, right? I mean, yeah, Adam, good point.
has anyone know what a remix is? What is a remix?
The original thing redone in a different format, taking a song and turning it into a dance mix or something.
Can you give an example of a good remix?
Yeah.
Is there going to be a test?
Yeah, is that one song I like? The guy on the piano.
John Legend.
John Legend, exactly. The guy on the piano. What's the name of the song?
All of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there's another version of. There's lots of those, right?
Can I just ask, because we only have a few minutes left, how many questions?
Was that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
No.
One more.
Has anyone ever heard of Sean Parker?
Yes.
Yes.
Is that your name?
I answer it.
He's the guy, the Napster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what else he does?
He's played by Justin Timberlake.
Yes.
Isaiah knows. Isaiah knows.
All right. So moving on. Other questions? Yes.
I just have a question about assuming that we may be moving into a world where theater is digitally available, a production may be digitally available, and where that can possibly be standard rather than exceptional, like the Sound of Music production that's televised, or Into the Woods from decades ago. How will that factor into the contracts that a writer signs, the contracts that an actor signs, and anybody else involved in the show, knowing that it may be available on Netflix or available for some sort of streaming widely, rather than that being maybe this happens for.
When it starts to become like probably this will happen.
Yes.
Right. So that's an interesting hypothetical. As we move more into digital distribution, what happens to the contracts? I think I will punt this to our lawyer on the panel first for your.
I'm actually going to punt it to Laura, since she's the union person, because your union's going to stand
Well,
up.
we're already starting to embed in our collective bargaining agreements, which then become the agreements for directors, things like collaboration language, meaning that the stage director has the right to collaborate with the capture director on the capture, the shot list, the blah, blah. So we're beginning to put things like that to make sure our billing's in line. So we're already beginning to move towards believing that this is going to happen. The economic terms, we're in the process of trying to figure out whether it's what the front end, what the back end, what goes into the CBA, what's left to the artist that happens to have the great agent versus the other one that, they've just landed their first Cats production and so they're screwed because they didn't have the agent. So we're trying to figure out economic models right now, but we're moving to make sure the creative terms are protected as we begin to try to understand the economic.
I think in terms of, you brought up the actors, for example, this is all, as Laura's saying, it's going to become standard, I believe. And right now, any new musical that gets produced, every actor that gets hired, or 99% of the time, they're going to be given, along with their regular contract, a cast album rider to sign. And that spells out the terms for what happens, what they get paid, front end, back end, when a cast album is recorded. And I think ultimately we're going to wind up with the same thing for capturing the video.
Just also in terms of though, if it's like I know that a first class rights option might be a reproduction as a film or a Broadway production of like a revival. If that becomes so standard such that we might want to start posting it on some medium online, what would the contracts look like for new writers that are signing contracts, and how might that play into existing contracts that existed before we even knew that the digital age was coming, or that even TV was coming?
Oh, that's interesting. So you're talking about, like, what do we do with stuff that's still under copyright that was written before the internet? what happens to those agreements. I mean, one of the interesting cases not in theater was with the re-release of the sitcom WKRP when they put out a box set of it. DVDs didn't exist when the rights agreements for all the music in the show were signed, and they decided that it was out of their budget to relicense the music. And so they hired 3 studio musicians to re-record generic classic rock sounding tracks that play through the whole sitcom. Yeah, if you get a DVD of WKRP in Cincinnati, it's totally different. but that's an interesting example. These problems do come up because the technology changes, even though the different agreements are negotiated at different times.
Speaking as from the writer's perspective, I'm not from the writers, but anyhow, my understanding of the writer's perspective on some of this, it may be the highest bar, because in talking with our colleagues at the Dramatists Guild, it's the exploitation of film, motion picture rights, that it's those other uses of the new play. The new play is going to be the hardest thing to wrestle with here, because that's embedded in the writer's agreement. There is their future in like a really material way. So how that barrier is going to be crossed or penetrated is, I think, it's going to be hard.
Well, in most instances, licensing agencies like this only hold the live stage licensing rights. So the mechanical, the audio, the video rights, anything like that is still controlled by the writer, by him or herself, and through their agent, right? So that would probably, I don't think it would really alter our licenses all that much.
No, but those things would get addressed, like if there was a Dramatists Guild agreement and an approved production contract, there's a rider that goes with it. It's called Article 22, and everything else that's not in the APC and the approved production contract is put into that. And an artist can agree to it or not agree to it. Usually the Dramatists Guild weighs in and says, we'll approve this for our members or not. But it's a negotiation. It's just business. So, a producer that thinks they want to make a video of it or a recording of it will attempt to get those rights. Otherwise, most contracts have a reservation of rights that anything other than what's being negotiated for here is reserved to the author.
Great. I think we have time for a couple more questions. So you and then Adam.
Hi. First, I just want to say thank you so much for all the service that you do for us, for the community in all the different ways, and really appreciate it. I basically just want to ask, I think the overall theme tonight and mainly this week is how important education is, and educating each other, educating students, future artists. What can we, people who are currently writing, creating intellectual property, aside from education, which is the most important thing, I don't even know if you can answer this, but what can we do to continue to be a part of that conversation, either with publishers, with legislators, with how can we continue to advocate and influence that conversation, if you have any suggestions.
So the question is about, what can the individual artist do if this is an issue that they care about? What can the individual artist do or be doing ongoing to, around the issue of piracy in the digital age?
I'm going to ask Stephen to answer that, because it's really about artists, I believe, educating themselves as to what their rights are. Well, good, you take it.
I think you start with yourself, right? And you have that integrity as far as the intellectual property that you create and perhaps that you are accessing. And then the next thing that you do is you pass that on to everybody you're working on that show with, and then the next show. And little by little, it spreads in a grassroots way through the theater community, and then we all have a lot more respect for the work that each of us is creating.
Sure.
I'm really career, really like you, and I end up producing a lot of my own stuff or producing for friends, and then kind of funnily find myself on the other side of the table raising money to pay people or not pay people or asking people to do things for free, which I think we need to stop doing and we need to stop agreeing to, even when we're first starting out.
Cool. Adam, you want to take us home? You got a question?
Sure. Just to go way back to Ryan's question about theater being inherently analog, I think there's a fair amount of evidence that
film productions and film adaptations of shows actually drive people back into the theater. I remember when the Chicago movie came out and the play was still running on Broadway and people thought it was going to close, and that was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I noticed a lot of theaters around the country are doing Into the Woods this spring, and I have to believe it's because they are assuming that they're going to see that sell really well because of the movie coming out at Christmas. I think
The Chicago movie won a bunch of Oscars.
Sure.
Which is a bit of a plus.
The Phantom movie did not, and sales for Phantom rose when that movie came out. And I think, and this is what NC Live does too, is that they're actually not trying to recreate the play, they're trying to create a really good filmed experience of that play and get people to then go see something live.
Just so you know, I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe the conventional wisdom is not that, at least from my perspective, is that usually if a movie's coming out, the play has about 8 weeks after that movie hits the theaters. It has 8 weeks left before it closes. Because why spend
I mean,
even if it's an art movie? I remember Steel Magnolias is the classic example. Because
Mamma Mia is still running, Rock of Ages is still running years after this movie. Those bad movies came out, in my opinion.
So just so you're clear, Adam thinks the movie.
Rock of Ages, yeah, I'll stand by that.
But if you can go see a movie with big name movie stars in it for $10 versus spending, $80 to $150 to see a Broadway star that maybe isn't as familiar to you.
Maybe the movie is not the best example, but I know that that's part of NC Live's goal. And also because it's a national theater and there have plays going on all the time, it may not be that the film is going to bring people to that play, but it may bring people to another one, or it may reach people who were never ever going to go to the theater in the first place. And so they're trying to make a really great movie theater experience for those people so they can see that and experience the work that way, and other people are going to go see it.
What I also, I'm sorry, what I also think happens from a stock and amateur standpoint is people see the movie, they know there's a play, and they say, I want to play that.
Right. How many of us did we go with in high school because we grew up on that on PBS? We did. You probably did. You mentioned earlier.
I think it's a conventional wisdom because I think it used to be true.
Right.
And I think that the world has changed, and I think if you even go back, forget about film, right? With the world of Les Mis and Phantom on Broadway in the late 80s and early 90s, and with multiple productions of those companies touring the country. And what was happening? People were seeing those productions in their hometown and coming to New York, and what were they going to go see? Les Mis or Phantom that they already saw in their hometown. I think we're consuming things in a different way now. We're consuming things, we want to see things multiple times. And that's very different than the old days where, Wizard of Oz or Sound of Music is going to be on once a year on CBS or whatever, and I'm going to sit down and watch it that one day because that's all I can get. And so we were sort of used to that world of we get it once and then maybe at some point in the future.
I think to Ryan's point, the live experience is different and people know that. And so if they get interested in the, I hate to say property, but in the property because of something out there, they might then, it's like seeing your favorite band live.
Yeah. Right. It happened with iTunes. I mean, there's this idea of fidelity recording, and iTunes squeezed the bit rates down to manageable downloadable sizes. So you did lose a sense of the original. You're listening to Beatles in little tiny earbuds. There is a problem there. And actually live videos of productions, even if they're done relatively poorly. So that, in some regard, degradation of quality is the main issue.
Right. So I hear the furtive noises of a wine and cheese party going on. So I just want to open it up to last words that anyone might have that they want to throw in.
Well, I would be remiss if I did not point out that moments before we walked up here, my new BFF Laura told me that today is her 25th wedding anniversary.
Well, what better way to end it? I just wanted to thank everyone. The conversation continues over there.
And I would like to thank you guys for a great.
Get up and enjoy everything. Sorry. First of all, can we give one more round of applause? This was an incredible panel to end on, so thank you all so much for coming. Sit with me tight for a minute because I have to give some major thank yous out. First, to Bruce Lazarus, and to Nate Collins. They are our executive director and our president, and if it weren't for their passion about these subjects, we wouldn't all be here today. So just a huge thank you to you guys. Things like this take a mighty village. So I just want to give a quick shout out to Brad, to Abby, to Ryan, to Chris, to Amy. Without them and their tireless efforts of getting panelists and coming up with ideas, we wouldn't all be here. And then
Well, so to be fair,
Yeah.
we wouldn't be here at all without Courtney's work. But no, Courtney and Abby really, but a lot of it, Courtney did the lion's share of the work organized this week and talking to panelists. So another round of applause for Courtney.
He's the best boss ever. I also want to give a shout out to all of our locations, many of whom representatives are here. New Dramatist, Lark Dramatist Guild, and Casey McLean back there from Samuel French, and Corinne and Elizabeth. They made it more than being hosts. They were actively involved. And then one final thank you to HowlRound. We're talking like you're there, and you are. They helped us. They have awesome essays up on their site, many written by people in this room, so go check it out. And now we invite you to not only come and enjoy some refreshments over there, but check out our script table. Please take one script, one tote bag. We want theater to spread, make theater happen. So,